Germany can do it, and the UK can do it, and France can do it, and Holland can do it, and Scandinavia can do it. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border in Burlington, Vermont. They're doing it up in Canada. If every other major country on earth can do it, the United States of America can do it. Now, I am a member of the Health Education Labor Senate Committee. That committee helped write the Affordable Care Act. Affordable Care Act has done a lot of very good things in this country. It has done away with this obscenity called pre-existing conditions. Total obscenity. We have added some 17 million people to the ranks of the insured. We have done away with discrimination against women in terms of the price they pay for their health insurance benefits. But let us be honest, because this country does not go forward unless we are honest and we look at the real issues. Despite the success of the ACA, and by the way, while I'm on that subject, count me in as somebody who will fight vigorously to end the so-called Cadillac tax. But today, despite the successes of the ACA, we got 29 million people who have no health insurance. We have even more who are underinsured with high deductibles and copayments. And I was just talking to some of the folks in the CWA who are right now negotiating a contract with Verizon. And of course, as is the case in virtually every contract negotiation, you got a corporation that wants the American worker to pay more for his or her health care benefits and get less care. All right, so we've got a lot of people out there with high deductibles and copayments, and we're getting ripped off every single day by the insurance companies who charge us the highest prices in the world for the medicine that we need. And that is why I believe that our eyes have got to be on the prize, and that the fight must continue for a Medicare for all single-payer program. Now, hard for me to understand, and again, this requires thinking outside of the box and outside of the status quo. We get used to it. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. 30 or 40 years ago, we had the strongest infrastructure in the entire world, the best bridges, the best roads, the best rail system, the best wastewater plants, the best water systems, levees and dams. That's no longer the case. Because of inadequate funding, our infrastructure in many parts of this country is collapsing. My wife Jane and I were in Flint, Michigan 5-6 weeks ago, and what I heard and saw there, with children being poisoned by lead in the water, is something to make everybody in this room disgusted, that this is happening in the year 2016. But it's not just Flint, Michigan. We have got to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, and we will develop a $1 trillion 5-year plan which will create 13 million decent-paying jobs. Now, you tell me why in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we are the only major country not to guarantee paid family and medical leave. Today, Philadelphia, Burlington, Vermont, a woman is having a baby. And if that woman is working class or low income, there is a strong likelihood that in 2 or 3 weeks after giving birth, she will be forced to be separated from her baby, go to work to earn enough money to take care of her family. That is not what should be happening in America, and that is why I support 3 months paid family and medical leave. Now, as all of you know, over the last number of years, the Republican Party has tried in every way possible to either privatize or make cuts in Social Security. That's right. And I have to tell you that there are actually some Democrats who joined Republicans a few years ago in trying to cut Social Security. I'm proud to tell you that I helped form the Defending Social Security Caucus in the Senate, and they have not yet cut Social Security, and they're not going to cut Social Security. But here in Pennsylvania and in Vermont and all over this country, media doesn't talk about this at all. So the media can turn off their cameras because they're not going to report this anyhow. But we have millions of seniors and disabled vets trying to get by on $11,000 or $12,000 a year Social Security. Do the arithmetic yourself. You can't buy the health care, the prescription drugs, you can't keep your house warm on $11,000 or $12,000 a year. And then, unbelievably, you got Republicans who want to cut Social Security today. Well, I've got some bad news for them. We're not going to cut Social Security. We're going to expand Social Security by lifting the cap on taxable income. Now, this is one of the areas where Secretary Clinton and I have a disagreement. I have been very clear. We've introduced legislation. Here's the reality. Somebody makes $5 million a year. Somebody makes $118,000 a year. They're both paying the same amount into the Social Security Trust Fund. If you lift that cap, if you start at $250,000 and above, we can expand the lifetime of Social Security by 58 years, and we can improve benefits significantly for Social Security beneficiaries, and that is what I intend to do. It's another area of difference between Secretary Clinton and myself, and this is an issue that you know a whole lot about because it has impacted many, many, many millions of Americans. When I came to the Congress in the early 1990s, it didn't take me a long time to figure out that the trade agreements being cooked up, in those days it was NAFTA, were going to be a disaster for working people. That these trade agreements were written by corporate America for one very clear purpose. Why do they want to pay workers in Pennsylvania $20, $25, $30 an hour, a decent wage, a middle-class wage, when they could shut down here in Pennsylvania, shut down in Vermont, move to Mexico, move to China, move to other low-wage countries? That was their intention when they wrote those agreements, and that is, of course, exactly what has happened. NAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, and other trade agreements have cost this country millions of decent-paying jobs and also precipitated a race to the bottom where employers say, you don't want to take that wage cut? No problem. We're going to China. And that is why in new manufacturing jobs that we're seeing in America, workers are earning wages 50, 60, 70% of what older workers got doing the same jobs. That's the race to the bottom. Not only did I vote against all of these disastrous trade agreements, I helped lead the opposition to all of them. Now, the CWA is dealing with it today, where Verizon is trying to take call center jobs, as I understand it, to the Philippines. And that's what's gone on year after year after year. Shut down in America, move jobs abroad. The middle class of this country will not survive. So I say to corporate America, if I'm elected president, you know what? You're going to be investing in this country, not in China or the Philippines. When we talk about what goes on in this country, it's not only a rigged economy, it is also a corrupt campaign finance system which is undermining American democracy. And I ask everybody here again, please do not accept the status quo. Do not accept that you turn on the TV in this country. And when I talk to veterans, even I just met a guy who's well into his upper 90s, fought in World War II. You get chills down your spine knowing the sacrifices that they made and the sacrifices of families whose loved ones never came home. Fighting for our way of life, fighting for American democracy. But let us be very honest and clear about it. As a result of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, democracy in America is being undermined. We have a handful of billionaires, people like the Koch brothers and others. You all know the Koch brothers, right? Who are prepared to spend some $900 million in this campaign cycle alone to elect candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful. When you have a handful of families spending more money than either the Democratic or the Republican parties, that is not democracy, that is oligarchy. We will not accept that. Now, I have been criticized for thinking too big, too radically. The idea that we can create 13 million jobs by rebuilding our infrastructure and paying for that by doing away with outrageous loopholes that allow corporations like Verizon and General Electric and others to stash their profits in the Cayman Islands and not pay in a given year a nickel in federal taxes. If it's called radical to try to do away with those loopholes so we can rebuild our infrastructure and create millions of jobs, you can call me a radical. What I have said during this campaign is that when we look at public education in America, it's not good enough just to look at first grade through 12th grade. The world has changed. The economy has changed. Young people need more education. And that is why I believe that we should make public colleges and universities tuition free. Just talked to a union man a little while ago, and he said right near here in Pennsylvania, there are hundreds of good-paying welding jobs available, and yet the company can't find qualified welders. And that's true in many areas. We need to make sure that our kids have the training to do those good-type jobs so they can earn living wages for their families. They need the training and the education to do that. And I've been called radical for saying that we will pay to make higher education at public colleges and universities free, tuition free, by imposing a tax on Wall Street speculation. Well, everybody here remembers that 8 years ago you helped bail out Wall Street after their greed and illegal behavior nearly destroyed this economy. I feel very comfortable about saying to them, now it is their time to help the working families of this country. I don't have to tell anybody in this room, because you know it better than anybody in America, that's what trade unions know, is that real change in this country never takes place from the top on down. It always takes place from the bottom on up. Nobody ever gave workers the permission to form a union. Not today, not historically. Workers had to fight to form unions to make sure that people in the unions had dignity and security on the job. That's how the women's movement developed. On up. And today we are in a pivotal moment in American history, where as Americans we have to take a very hard look at the status quo in our country. We have to ask ourselves whether it is acceptable that so few have so much and so many have so little. Whether it is acceptable that a handful of billionaires can exert unbelievable influence over the political and legislative process. Whether it is acceptable that the middle class continues to disappear and almost all new income and wealth goes to the 1%. Whether it's acceptable that we are the only major country on earth that does not provide health care or paid family and medical leave to all. Whether it is acceptable that hundreds of thousands of bright, qualified young people are unable to get the education that they need. Or whether we are not dealing effectively or not with the crisis of climate change. Whether we are not dealing effectively with a criminal justice system which is broken and has more people in jail than any other country on earth. Those are some of the issues that are out there. And what I am perceiving is that all over this country, and I've been in California and I've been in Maine and a lot of states in between, the American people are saying no. That is not acceptable. That is not what this country should be about. And what people are saying is it is too late for establishment politics. It is too late for establishment economics. That we need to bring millions of people together, and in my view, the trade union movement is right in the middle of that struggle. To stand up and say to the billionaire class, sorry, you are not going to have it all. Sorry, we are not going to allow your greed to continue to destroy the working families of this country. Now, let me end my remarks on a note of real optimism. What happens when people stand up and fight back? If we were here in this room 5 years ago, somebody jumps up and says, you know, Ber-nie, I think this $7.25 an hour minimum wage is a starvation wage. I think we have to raise that minimum wage 5 years ago to $15 an hour. What the person next to him would have said is, $15 an hour? You want to more than double the minimum wage? You're nuts. You got to be more conservative. You got to be more realistic. Don't be so radical. But then what happened because of the efforts of the trade union movement? Thank you very much. Workers in the fast food industry, they went out on strike. People at McDonald's and at Burger King and at Wendy's, they said to the community, we can't live on $7.25 an hour. We want and need $15 an hour. And then you know what happened? The communities around this country heard them and said, you're right. And then in Seattle, a couple of years ago, $15 an hour. Los Angeles, $15. San Francisco, $15. In the last month alone, Oregon, California, New York State, $15 an hour. This happened. This idea, which 5 years ago would have been thought to be radical and unthinkable, is happening today because people stood up and fought for it. So don't tell me that we cannot transform this country, that we can't create good-paying jobs by rebuilding our infrastructure, that we can't have paid family and medical leave and health care for all like every other major country on earth. Please don't tell me that, because it's not true. It can happen if we are prepared to stand up together, not let the Donald Trumps of the world divide us up. And when we stand together, and when we have a vision which says that we have a government that works for all of us, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. Thank you all very much.